You know that feeling when you're standing in the security line, watching people get pulled aside, bags ripped open, agents shaking their heads, and you think to yourself, I've been flying for 40 years. How did I almost just become that person? Here's a question I want you to honestly consider before you even think about packing your next carry-on. When was the last time you actually read the Transportation Security Administration's official guidelines from start to finish? I'm genuinely curious, and I want you to share your answer in the comments after we get through this, because your answer might just be the thing that saves you from a travel nightmare the next time you're shuffling toward the gate. Let me start by saying I've spent decades in the air, not just as a passenger, but as someone who studies how aviation systems work, the psychology behind security protocols, and the quiet, often unspoken rules that determine whether your journey is smooth or whether you find yourself in a small room answering questions. I've sat across from transportation security officers, talked with airline operations managers, and watched seniors get tripped up by rules that seem arbitrary until you understand the reasoning behind them. So let's strip away the confusion. Here are the airport rules you absolutely need to know. Let's talk about curbside check-in. You've been using it for years, tipping the sky cap, watching your bags disappear. But here's what a lot of seniors don't realize anymore. In many airports today, if you're not actively checking a bag, you cannot linger. I've seen elderly travelers step out of a rideshare, realize they've forgotten something, and try to walk back toward the terminal only to be told they need to go through a completely different security screening just to re-enter the area they just left. The curbside is considered a restricted zone now. The days of casually standing outside while you reorganize your suitcase are over. Arrive with your bags ready to go. Know exactly where you're being dropped off. And if you're using a mobility device, arrange assistance before you even get out of the car. Now let's move inside, because this is where things get really interesting. The liquids rule. I'm not going to give you the basic 311 spiel everyone's heard 1,000 times. Instead, I want to tell you what the officers are actually looking for. Prescription medications. People assume that because they have a prescription label, the rule doesn't apply. In many cases, that's true, but there's a specific way you have to handle it. If you have liquid medications over 3.4 ounces, you must declare them to the officer at the start of the screening process. You don't just leave them in your bag and hope they don't notice. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. A senior with a bottle of liquid medication tucked inside a toiletry bag, and when the X-ray picks it up, suddenly the entire line comes to a halt while they pull the bag, test the contents, and question the passenger. Put all your medications in a separate, easily accessible compartment. As soon as you approach the conveyor belt, tell the officer you have liquid medications that exceed 3.4 ounces. You'll likely be asked to remove them for additional screening, but you'll be through in minutes instead of being pulled aside. Another area where seniors consistently run into trouble is with medical devices and mobility aids. The rule, as written, is that passengers with disabilities are entitled to have their assistive devices screened without being separated from them unless absolutely necessary. But here's the reality. I've had travelers tell me they were asked to remove their hearing aids and place them in a bin, which is not only unnecessary, but risky because those devices are expensive and easily damaged. The correct procedure is that you can inform the officer that you cannot remove the device, and they are supposed to accommodate you with a private screening. The key word there is inform, not ask. You have to be confident and clear. If you use a cane, a walker, a wheelchair, those items will be screened separately. They'll go through the X-ray if they're small enough, or they'll be physically inspected. And if you're in a wheelchair going through security, you will be asked to stand if you're able, or you'll be patted down if you're not. The chair itself will be swabbed for explosive residue. Allow extra time, know your rights, and if you feel the process is being handled improperly, ask for a supervisory officer. Let's talk about the boarding pass, not whether you have it on your phone or printed out. I mean the information on that pass that most people never look at until they're standing at the gate. There's a rule about boarding times that's become a silent trap for seniors. Airlines have staggered boarding processes, and the exact moment you're allowed to board is determined by your ticket type, your status, and sometimes your age. But if you're a senior who needs extra time or assistance, many airlines will allow you to board early, but you have to request it. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen someone in their 70s or 80s standing in the general boarding line, looking exhausted, while the gate agent announces pre-boarding and no one moves. The rule is that you have to identify yourself. The gate agent isn't going to walk through the crowd and pick you out. The moment you arrive at the gate, go to the podium, introduce yourself, and let them know you'll need either pre-boarding or assistance. They'll note it in their system, and you'll have a much smoother experience. Electronic devices. Seniors in particular seem to be caught in a gray area here because many travel with multiple devices. Tablets, e-readers, smartphones, sometimes small laptops. The current standard at most airports is that any device larger than a smartphone must be removed from your carry-on bag and placed in a bin by itself. But here's the nuance. If you have TSA PreCheck, you're usually exempt from this rule. Seniors who have PreCheck often don't realize that the rules for the PreCheck lane are different, and they'll start pulling everything out unnecessarily. Conversely, seniors who don't have PreCheck will sometimes leave their laptops in their bags thinking it's fine, and then they get sent to the back of the line. Knowing which lane you're in and what the specific requirement is can save you a tremendous amount of stress. Now, what happens if you're selected for additional screening? I'm talking about the pat-down. For many seniors, this is uncomfortable, sometimes frightening. But the rule is that you have the right to request a private screening, and you also have the right to have a companion with you. I've spoken with older travelers who were subjected to pat-downs in the middle of the security checkpoint surrounded by strangers and felt humiliated. They didn't know they could ask to go to a private room. And if the officer conducting the pat-down is of the opposite gender, you can request an officer of your same gender. This is your right under TSA policy. Exercising these rights might cause a slight delay, and the officer might act annoyed. But that's not your problem. Your dignity matters. Ask for a supervisor if needed. Let's shift gears to checking in online versus checking in at the airport. There's a rule in the fine print of airline contracts that most travelers don't think about until it's too late. If you don't check in for your flight by a certain time, usually 45 minutes to an hour before departure for domestic flights, the airline can cancel your reservation and give your seat to someone on standby. I've seen seniors who arrive at the airport 2 hours early, walk up to the counter, and check in the old-fashioned way, only to be told their reservation was canceled because they didn't check in online within the required window. The workaround is simple. Check in online as soon as it opens, usually 24 hours before departure. You don't have to print anything. Just complete the digital check-in, secure your seat, and then proceed to the airport at your leisure. Now, what you wear through security. There's no official dress code, but there are practical considerations. I've seen elderly passengers wearing large metal belt buckles, heavy jewelry, or complicated footwear, and they end up spending 10 minutes at the checkpoint removing and replacing items. Wear slip-on shoes, avoid belts, empty your pockets completely before you even get in line. Leave heavy jewelry at home or pack it, and if you're wearing a bulky jacket, you will almost certainly be asked to remove it. That means you're standing there in possibly just a thin shirt while your jacket goes through the X-ray. Dress in layers that are easy to manage. If you have difficulty bending, consider using a small folding stool or cane to steady yourself while you put your shoes back on. Food and snacks. Solid foods are generally allowed, but there are exceptions. Anything spreadable like peanut butter, jam, or cream cheese is considered a liquid or gel, which means it has to comply with the 3.4-ounce rule. I've watched seniors have to throw away full jars of expensive specialty foods because they didn't realize that jar of jam was considered a gel. And frozen foods are allowed, but if they're partially melted, they're treated as liquids. So if you're traveling with frozen goods, they need to be completely solid when you go through screening. If they've started to thaw, you might be asked to dispose of them. Mobile boarding passes and digital documentation. There's an unspoken rule now that airports expect you to be comfortable with technology, and if you're not, you're going to have a much harder time. I've seen seniors standing at the gate frantically trying to pull up their boarding pass on a phone with a cracked screen and a dying battery while the gate agent calls their name and threatens to give away their seat. If you're not confident with mobile technology, print your boarding pass at home or use the kiosk at the airport to print one as soon as you arrive. Keep that paper boarding pass somewhere safe, not stuffed in a bag where you'll have to dig for it while people are waiting behind you. Your personal information and how it's checked against your boarding pass. When you show your ID to the TSA officer, they're looking for a match between the name on your ID and the name on your boarding pass. I've seen this trip up seniors with hyphenated names, middle names, or who have recently changed their name. If your ID says one thing and your boarding pass says something slightly different, even just a missing middle initial, you can be denied entry to the security checkpoint. Book your ticket exactly as your name appears on your government-issued ID. If there's a discrepancy, arrive early enough to go to the airline counter and have them correct the boarding pass before you try to go through security. Timing. There's a rule that's not written down anywhere, but that every experienced traveler knows. The airport is not the place to cut it close. Security lines can balloon without warning. A single incident at one checkpoint can cause ripple effects throughout the entire terminal. The unwritten rule is to add an extra hour to whatever the airline recommends, especially during peak hours, holidays, or inclement weather. Use that extra time to your advantage. Find your gate first, then find the nearest restroom, then find a place to sit where you can see the gate area and hear announcements. I've seen seniors miss flights because they wandered off and didn't hear the gate change announcement. And when a gate changes at a major airport, it can change to a completely different concourse. If you're using a mobility aid, you might not make it. Connections. Most people focus so heavily on getting through security that they forget the rules apply on the other side too. There's a rule about minimum connection times that airlines are supposed to enforce, but they don't always. Seniors often find themselves with connections that are technically legal but practically impossible. If you have a tight connection in a large airport and you have mobility issues, advocate for yourself before you even book. Use the airline's website to see the minimum connection time, and if you need more time, call and ask to be booked on a flight with a longer connection. If you miss that connection because you couldn't physically make it, the airline is not always obligated to compensate you. Service animals and emotional support animals. The regulations have tightened significantly. Service animals are trained to perform specific tasks and are allowed in the cabin with proper documentation. Emotional support animals are no longer guaranteed the same rights. Many airlines now treat them as pets, which means they need to be in an approved carrier and you'll likely pay a fee. I've watched seniors become distressed because they were told their small dog, which they've flown with for years, is now not allowed to sit on their lap. Check with your airline well in advance, fill out the required forms, and have your animal in an approved carrier that fits under the seat. Random explosives trace tests. This is where an officer takes a small swab and wipes it on your hands, your bag, or your shoes. I've seen seniors react with panic when selected, assuming they've done something wrong. The truth is, these selections are often random. Stay calm and cooperative. Don't make jokes about bombs. Don't make nervous comments. Just let them do the swab, wait for the result, and you'll be on your way in seconds. If you become agitated or argumentative, you'll only make it longer. Oversold flights. Airlines oversell flights as a matter of course. When everyone shows up, they start asking for volunteers to take a later flight in exchange for compensation. For seniors who aren't in a rush, this can seem like an easy way to get a travel voucher, but the compensation is often in the form of a voucher that expires within a year, and the next flight might not be for hours, or even until the next day. I've seen seniors take the offer without asking questions, only to find themselves stranded overnight with no hotel because the airline's policy only covers lodging for involuntary denied boarding. If you're considering giving up your seat, ask specifically what the compensation is, whether it's cash or a voucher, when it expires, what time the next flight is, and whether the airline will provide a hotel and meals. If they can't answer clearly, don't take the offer. Lithium batteries and medical devices. Many seniors travel with portable oxygen concentrators, CPAP machines, electric scooters. First, if you're traveling with a portable oxygen concentrator, you must notify the airline at least 48 hours in advance. This is not optional. If you show up without having done this, you can be denied boarding. Second, spare lithium batteries must be carried in your carry-on luggage, never in checked bags. And they must be protected from short-circuiting, which means in their original packaging, or with terminals covered with tape, or in individual plastic bags. International travel. If you're traveling internationally, there's a rule about passport validity that trips people up constantly. Many countries require that your passport be valid for at least 6 months beyond your intended departure date. I've seen seniors arrive at the airport, check in, and be told at the gate they can't board because their passport expires in 5 months. They've already said goodbye to family, checked their bags, and now they're being sent home. Check the entry requirements for your destination country before you book anything. And if you're traveling with medications, check whether those medications are legal in the country you're visiting. Carry a copy of your prescription and a letter from your doctor explaining the medical necessity. Now, I'm going to ask you again about that question from the beginning. When was the last time you actually read the TSA guidelines from start to finish? And after hearing what I've laid out here, what's one thing you're going to change about how you prepare for your next flight? Share that in the comments. Tell me what surprised you, what you think is the most overlooked rule, and if you've ever had an experience at the airport that taught you a hard lesson. The airport is a system, and like any system, it rewards those who understand how it works. You don't have to be an aviation expert or a frequent flyer to navigate it successfully. You just need the right information, a little patience, and the willingness to advocate for yourself when necessary. You've earned the right to travel comfortably and confidently without the stress of being caught off guard by a rule you didn't know existed. Safe travels, and I'll see you in the comments.